question is, your forthcoming book detailing your experiences during the imprisonment period in Myanmar's economic history holds immense significance. Could you give us a glimpse into the inspiration and process behind penning down your journey and the country story?
This is the first book, is it? What is it?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that, I mean, there's so many things that are interesting about Myanmar, but one of the things I fell in love with very early, this by the way is a little bit nerdy, a little bit academic wonky, but one of the things about finance and banking and all that sort of stuff, and we all know it, right, is that money has no tangible value, right? The notes that you're carrying in your pocket, the value that you've got in your card, etc., it's nothing, right? In its electronic form, it has no physical existence whatsoever. But even those polymer notes, or those coins we carry around, have no value whatsoever. Now, why do we value them? Why do we work for them, save in them? Why do we obsess about them? Well, the answer to that, of course, is that they are simply items of trust. We use them, we work for them, we save with them, all that stuff, simply because we know other people value them. So in other words, it's a giant trust network, that's it. Now the reason why I'm highlighting that is just to say, if we look deep into Myanmar's monetary history, we actually see the true meaning of things like that through the history. So the reason why the Jat these days, under Min Aung Rai and all his clowns, the reason why it's fallen in value by 3 times is simply because nobody trusts that administration, that regime, to do anything proper when it comes to economic policy making. And so telling the monetary history of Myanmar, which I did in that first book, Fiery Dragons, is an interesting way of telling some deeper stories about Myanmar, but also about the world as well, and the importance of trust, the importance of the rule of law, the importance of democracy, all the things that everyone in this room has struggled for so long. So, yeah, Myanmar is an inspiring country in so many ways, but even at that level. So that's what pulled me in a sense, as an academic, to some of those issues.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to go on to our next question. Your incarceration in Myanmar's prison was a profoundly challenging experience. How did you maintain hope and resilience during those difficult times? What sustained you through these moments? Do you still love Myanmar people? Obviously you do. Will you ever go back and visit the country and also be involved like how you were before?
So answering the first part, not yet. So I think Min Aung Lai's got a reception committee waiting for me if I go back, so I won't be doing it yet. But, I mean, on that score, if I may just go off question a little bit, I mean, some of the news in the last few days, last few weeks, incredibly encouraging, right? Be interested to get people's opinion on this, but gosh, you sort of dare not to hope, right? But wow, it's hard not to at the moment. Sorry, that diverted a little bit. I mean, the ways I coped, very, very easy, and you probably heard me say it before, but I love to say it again. It's because of the support of everyone here. It's the support of this person. It's the support of everyone here, all sorts of people I can see. I won't name because I might forget someone, but it's all of that. And the good thing is I knew about it at the time. Because the embassy, after a long time, was able to establish contact, through this person, I got to know not only of her support, but all of your support as well. Harwood sent me great details in letters and comments that everyone was coming behind me. I mean, it's been great to see some of the pictures up here. Some of these I haven't seen before, but I knew a lot of this was going on. So that gave me incredible support because I never felt lonely at all. Like, yeah, that was a thought I didn't have. And again, I think this is what another message, you know, that I keep on pushing, in that even though I suffered a bit, compared to mine, it's nothing, right? Because I knew in the end I had everyone here behind me, I had a whole country behind me, I had other countries behind me. But so many of my Myanmar friends didn't know that. They're cut off. I mean, probably deep down they knew it, but it wasn't as obvious for them as it was for me. So yeah, it's an easy one to answer. Number one, the support of everyone here in Australia, in Myanmar, here. By the way too, in Myanmar, I got to know the support in Myanmar. A couple of times I got taken off to the hospital and taken away from the prison, and I was in a police van, and even as the van sometimes overtook cars, in that really arrogant way, by the way, that the military always operate there, right? So other cars have to get out of the way and this sort of stuff. But as we're going past, every so often people would look up and they'd look to see if the soldiers were looking, and if they weren't, they'd be going like this. It was just fantastic. It happens so many times. Little thumbs up gestures, sometimes even from prison guards and police would say, like, good on you, keep going, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, the support was everywhere. So yeah, easy question to answer, it's the support of everyone.
Well, that's really fantastic to hear about. Even the prisoner and police were rooting for them. Thank you, Sean. For the next question, your journey in serving as the Senior Economic Advisor to Myanmar's democratic government was remarkable. Could you share some of the defining moments during your tenure that shaped your perspective on Myanmar's economic landscape?
So many things. Above all, the incredible resilience of the team that were doing it, because it was really tough. But I mean, the terrible irony is that we had just got things to a place where I think economic growth was really going to kick up, because in many ways the first term of the government was doing the really tough stuff, the deep institutional stuff, cutting back on the deficit, ending money financing and all that, the tough, unpopular things. We'd done all of that, and we were just about to kick in with some big fiscal programs, infrastructure, health expenditure, all that. The fiscal space had really opened up, and we were really going to push on. So the resilience of the team in doing all of this, and their strength in pushing back against the bureaucracy. Because again, this won't surprise anyone here, the bureaucracy, the whole civil service in Myanmar had been created to serve a military state. So it was really hierarchical and rigid, you could never get anything through. But the key reformers, who again I so wish I could name and in more detail, but they were so courageous in just pushing it through. Dorsu always had their back, and so if things got too bad, we would go to Dorsu and she would just, boom, clear it through. But we tried to limit the time on her as much as we could. But yeah, so I think the struggle above all, at a really practical level too, because this is a story that I think is not told enough. So many individual success stories, but one that really stood out was the way that Myanmar, under Dorsu, under the NLD, was able to push back on China's BRI. Had they not done that, Myanmar would have had a debt of well over $10 billion for a project that was just mad, made no sense at all to any country except China. But the government under Dorsu renegotiated it and turned it into a project that would have been really good. It would have served the country and all that. So that particular episode to me stands out. But look, lots of other things. But and I was extremely proud to serve alongside all those economic reformers.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's really, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, beyond trying to tread through all these corruptions and, economic reforms. So you have done a tremendous job, and thank you so much for that. For our next question, Aung will be asking.
Yeah, I got a question from one of the friends sent me their message. So he said that how does the military strong influence over the Myanmar economy affect on the NLD government ability to implement reforms? And the next one is the consequential question. In the movie version of your book, do you wanted a Brad Pitt to play your character? Why not Russell Crowe or another Australian actor?
Oh, that's a hard question. I wasn't expecting that one. Yes, indeed. I think probably people saw me on the TV or somewhere where I said I feared it was going to be Danny DeVito, but somebody on Facebook said, Sean, it could be worse. It could be Woody Allen. Anyway, no, I'll go with Russell Crowe. That's all right. Cool. On the first one, I mean, it's a great question because, I mentioned a moment ago the problems of the bureaucracy, but of course the biggest problem was the military. And they were there all the time. And this is really important to stress because as we know, much of the international community did not understand what was going on, and some of the criticism of Dorsey and the government was really unfair because they didn't know what was going on, and they didn't listen. Even though, Dorsey on many occasions said, look, you don't know how hard it is. And one of the things she didn't say publicly, but she knew, and we would talk about all the time, the military was always a hair trigger away from coming back in. Always. The whole time we were there. A week wouldn't have gone by without a rumour going around that the military was about to have a coup. And you'd be up there in Naypyidaw, and there'd only be a couple of army trucks parked in one of the shopping centre car parks, and the rumours would go around that a coup was taking place. And then, of course, it finally did, which proved the fears that everyone had. But the other thing, of course, was that the government, and this made Dorsey's government, made reforms so hard because the military had a lock on so much of the economy. And it seems bizarre, particularly in a country like Australia, that the civilian government had no control over the defence budget at all. Zero. In fact, the defence budget, which was far and away the biggest item of government spending, like many, many times the amount of spending on everything else, could not even be discussed by the government, let alone could they not change it. So in other words, if you're trying to reform, and you say trying to increase or decrease spending, the biggest item of spending was completely out of your control. Apart from that, you've got those giant military companies, Myanmar Economic Corporation, Myanmar Economic Holdings. Then on top of that, all the cronies that are aligned with the military, and it just meant that huge parts of the economy were under the military control. But it didn't stop either Dorsey or her government from pushing, and that's what they were trying to do. So right across that term, from 2016 to 2021, constantly pushing. And this, of course, is ultimately one of the causes of the coup, because those reforms were starting to bite, and the military was beginning to feel encroached upon, right? And the crony enterprises, I had many of the banks would complain to me, because they often didn't dare complain to Dorsey, but they'll come and complain that we were, basically intruding on their territory, and one of them famously said to me, Sean, if we go down, you're all going down with us. And that's what they tried to do, right? But it was a huge task. So economic reform, as we know, is difficult anywhere, but if you've got a military that has locked away so much of the economy, it just makes it so much tougher.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. Thank you, Sean. We're now going to turn to the audience for any questions that you might have to ask Sean. I'm going to be coming to you. If you can put your hands up if you have any question for Sean.
Hi, Sean. How are you, mate?
Thank you, Terrell. Very good, mate.
Sean, what I like to ask, the thing you suffer in Burma, inside the prison, after reading your books and your script and things like that, it's very, very rough and very, very tough for anyone. And most of the people, even for a few weeks, if they experience something like that, they have this PTSD, post-traumatic, disorder. So those people, they can't sleep and they can't do that normal work. So after the experience you met in Burma, it's really horrible, it's really terrible. So how are you handling it?
Great question. Turnell? Look, pretty good, to be honest. And again, it's partly the support of everyone here. I think it helps with anything like that to have purpose, right? And to have something to, a goal, if you like. And the book was part of that. So that was, I wouldn't say therapy, but I had to get it out, you know. And again, you might have heard me say this elsewhere, that about 1/3 of the book I actually wrote in the prison, and I memorised it. Particularly section 2, literally word for word, I memorised it. And even I would get up on a particular day, add a sentence, add a sentence, add a sentence. Sometimes go back and correct individual words, or even a comma or a full stop, but I would just remember it, and it kept my mind occupied at the time in the prison. And then when I got back to Australia, just getting it down on paper was, I think, really important, because it sort of, it sort of reconciled something from that past, and that enabled me to redeem it, if you like, the promise that I had in my head about getting the story out. So that was really a part of it. But the support of everyone, again, the support of this person, my daughter Wong just there in the audience, and everyone here, that support's just been incredibly important. Sydney doesn't hurt either, right? This beautiful city, and Har and I, as Monzim mentioned on Facebook, we tour around all these great cafes of Sydney and all that. That's pretty good. So all of that has helped as well. I do have moments, like us all, so I don't want to pretend, you know, some sort of wonderful ability to surmount everything, because I still wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes yelling. I have this terrible recurring dream that varies a little bit, but it always has the same theme, that I'm in the prison, about to be released, but something goes wrong right at the last minute, getting to the gate. Very often it's a bit of paper that's missing a stamp or a signature or something like that. But of course, as everyone in this audience knows, in Myanmar, that's a reality. So on that day that I was released, 1 year ago yesterday, one of the things, I was very excited, of course, when they told me I was going to be released, but a fear that I had all the way through would be, and which they commonly do to Myanmar people, is that they escort them to the gate, let them out, and rearrest them, and put another set of charges on. It's just so despicable, right, in terms of just messing with people's heads. So there's a sort of reality to that. So anyway, but I have that over and again as well. But yeah, just the idea, I think, writing the book, and again, just working with all the people here, just pushing on, really good home in every way. It just gets me through. But thanks, Carol.
We've got the next question.
Hi, Professor. My question is regarding the future of Myanmar. So after the war for democracy, what would be your advice to the National Unity Government to restore the economy of Myanmar? Thank you.
Yeah, a really good question, and also one of the good ones in the sense that it's quite easy to answer. Just about all of Myanmar's current and even past economic problems come from what I used to always call, and I mentioned this to Dorsu, the original sin, which is basically that you've got this overwhelming military apparatus that sucks all the resources out of the economy. Now, in a really practical way, in financial terms, right? So the Myanmar keeps running these massive budget deficits, hidden for the most part. And the taxation system doesn't work. The bond market, which we spent a lot of time trying to get working, and again, we got it to a really nice place, it's not working anymore. So all the regime does, as it's always done, is just print money. And that's incredibly destructive. It's the reason why inflation is so much higher than it is anywhere else. It's the reason why there are so many goods that people just can't buy and that are not on the shelves. It's the reason why the jat falls in value. It's the reason for all the distortions, the corruption and everything else. So this overwhelming military state is the problem. And we just got to the point of dramatically shrinking it. And by the way, this isn't just me saying it. If you have a look at the last Article 4 consultation of the IMF, you can see how the NLD government shrunk the money printing all the way down to zero by 2020. Anyway, but the reason why I'm highlighting this is turning that around is not rocket science. It's actually really easily done. The other thing is that just as the coup took place, we were all working on this new economic plan, but it wasn't central planning, I hasten to add. It was just an economic blueprint to push the economy post-COVID into becoming the last and best of the tigers that we're always talking about. So this thing called the Myanmar Economic Resilience and Reform Plan is just fantastic. It was all the things that we wanted to do in the first term, but in the second term, with all those foundations laid, and also Dorsu and some of the ministers with a fresh mandate, which of course they'd gotten from the elections in 2020, they were ready to go. And so intellectually, it's all there. It's all written. The people are there, particularly these young economic reformers, but the older ones too. But all these reformers, they know what to do. It's all ready to go. So get the military out, and I think the rebound could be incredibly quick.
Thank you, Sean. I can imagine that this time around, the reformation is going to be quite solid. We've got the next question.
Sean, the daily news that comes out from Burma is most depressing. I would like you please to give us a little smattering of hope that someday democracy will be returned to our country. Please, your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you for all your work, by the way, and yeah, thank you for the question. I do have hope. I don't think it's unrealistic hope. So I mentioned earlier, but you know, this is not remotely my area of speciality, but just to say that for myself, like many of you, I am heartened by some of the news, some of the very practical news, literally on the battlefield over the last few days. Let's see. We've been here before, right? So we don't want to get too far ahead, but surely they suggest reason for hope on that front. But look, even apart from that, and I guess the issue is just how long it's going to take, but I have immense hope, mainly because, again, of the people. Monzin mentioned earlier the Myanmar Development Institute. I couldn't have been prouder to work with people of the calibre in that institution, from older to younger, but again, particularly the younger people. They were just so good. But also the young political prisoners, all the people I met. I mean, it was just so overwhelming, the courage and compassion and all that. Again, I mentioned that my position was relatively privileged to all these other political prisoners, and yet they were supporting me. They're the ones who are providing me food. They're the ones trying to keep my mood up. They're just doing everything. I think I mentioned at the gala a few months ago about the way that the prisoners on death row gave me their food, their bread ration. I mean, so these are people who, you know, I mean, just beyond despair, I think, for any of us, right? But they're giving me, they're extending me this incredible generosity. And I had that just again and again and again. So, I mean, if there is any justice in the world, and I'd like to think there is, that the long arc of history, it's hard to look around the world and see it at the moment, but I do think the long arc of history is going in a certain direction. Then those people will get their justice, and the Myanmar will become this prosperous and peaceful place. But the reason why I have hope for that, again, is for these people. These people, meaning, you know, most of the people in Myanmar, overwhelmingly. And, you know, one of the things I was so pleased about to write in the book is just to reassert that. And it's right in the beginning, opening pages. The other thing I just wanted to say on that too, because it's a question I forget, which is, what did Dorsu think about all of this, all of what we're doing now? And I was really pleased to be able to say firsthand, so this is not secondhand or anything, direct from her lips, that she absolutely loved and deeply, deeply respected what the people of Myanmar were doing right now. Like, not in the past or anything, but the way that they stood up against the military, the way that they had defended democracy, notwithstanding that their experience of democracy was so brief and imperfect in all the ways that we know, but the people were willing to put their lives down to fight for that principle was incredibly important to her. She was moved and touched by it, and it was one of the main things that she said to me to make sure that I mentioned whenever I could. So, Alison, this gives me an opportunity to say that. And so, from her, but from just about everyone I encountered, it is possible to have hope. But, you know, we've just got to push these buggers in green out of the way and then let the people do what we know they can do.
From Tasnim Rock, the campaign manager for Myanmar Campaign Network. Hi, Sean. I hope you can feel how much love in the room there is for you. We're so delighted that you are here and you're safe. I know you've spoken about this in other forums before, but what can the Australian government do? As you said, there's been recent shifts in the last couple of weeks and there is a new sense of hope, but what can the Australian government do to support the pro-democracy movement?
So, I think there are a couple of really practical things that they can do. So we mentioned about the military is getting ever more desperate, right? We can see it all around. But again, with my economics hat on, as an economist, you know, that whole thing of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So for me, as an economist, everything looks like an economic problem and an economic solution. But the reason why I mention that is just to say, if I think about how do I know that the military is desperate, I don't know much about military stuff, right? So I just got to read the reports about that. But one of the things I do know about is stuff about finance. And if we look at what the military are doing now, they are absolutely desperate for foreign exchange, right? It's their only economic policy. One of the other questions I've had, you know, from interviewers and all that is about the junta's economic policy. Well, it's really simple. There is no economic policy, right? All they're trying to do is grab as much resources as they can, but above all, they're trying to get foreign exchange because they've damaged the economy so much, not only now, but for decades, that Myanmar can't produce, right, the heavy equipment that they need to equip the military. So they need it to buy from their friends and allies. Of course, they're not real friends, but anyway, they're fair weather friends, etc. They need that money to buy weapons from China, from Russia especially, of course, and a few other countries. Now, if we can choke that off, if we can help choke that off, then that seems to me that's something that Australia can do. So, amongst the really effective sanctions that have emerged in recent times, and again, we don't need to theorise about this. We look at the regime's behaviour to know that it's working. The sort of sanctions that have been levied by the United States especially, but a little bit around the edges by the UK, the US, the EU, and even Singapore, is to tighten those financial screws on the regime. And this is why they're suddenly doing all this other stuff, right? How they're making people with remittances send 25% of it through the banking system. It's why they're brought in these new measures about taxing remittances. It's why they're doing all these things about surrender requirements of anyone with foreign exchange. It's why they're arresting all the foreign exchange dealers. All that sort of stuff, right? We don't listen to their words, we look at what they're doing, and they're desperate for foreign exchange. So it seems to me that one of the things Australia can do, and it costs us almost nothing, it seems to me, because it's not like there's a lot of military money coming here, though there's a bit, which is worth cutting off anyway. But it seems to me, why don't we just back our friends and allies anyway, right? Just go with the Americans, go with the Brits, go with the Singaporeans, they're all our friends anyway, and just tighten those financial screws on things like the Myanmar Investment and Commercial Bank, Myanmar Foreign Trade Bank, etc. The other thing that seems to have been really productive in recent times has been the sanctioning on the jet fuel, right? Because a little bit like the banks, The banking sanctions, it seems to me, have very little in the way of collateral damage, as they call it, because as we know, most people in Myanmar don't have a bank account. It's overwhelmingly, particularly international banking transactions, overwhelmingly connected entities and all that. But likewise, the jet fuel. If we think now, who were the users of jet fuel in Myanmar? Well, it's the Myanmar Air Force to bomb people. And there's lots of evidence, again, not words, but evidence by behaviour, where the regime is really being ill-affected by these jet fuel sanctions. If you look at the importation data, it's now they've had to go around the usual sources to try and get jet fuel in. So those are just a couple of really practical, almost technical things that seems to me wouldn't cost Australia very much. They're, I think, not very controversial or anything like that. But we can do that not only to help the people of Myanmar, but to help Myanmar's friends around the world to signal, and more than signal, actually affect the ability of the regime to wage war on their own people.
Thank you, Sean. We're going to take the last two questions from the audience. Does anyone have any question? Okay.
Hi. A little bit the same question, but not exactly the same question. What would you encourage Australian people to do locally to help the Myanmar people to get their democracy back quicker?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because one of the great, I mean, the actual facts on the ground are the greatest tragedy, but as an extra icing on the cake of tragedy has been the way that Myanmar as an issue has just slipped down the world's attention, right? First, it came because now that, of course, the Hamas attacks and all of that, so Myanmar has just slipped down the list of international attention. So it would be great if people would pay more attention to that, but in some ways that's up for us to do as well. And I mean, one of the reasons why, you know, all the razzmatazz about the book and all that, you know, one of my motivations to do it is an instrumental reason, right? The more fuss we can make about the book, the more Australians might pay attention, because as we all know, right, the average person, probably a country like Myanmar, particularly if it's called Myanmar, if it's called Burma, they probably know a bit more, because they've been residents in Australia for grandparents and so on that fought in the war and all that sort of stuff. But for people in Australia, it all sounds a bit remote. And so my story, even though, you know, this is an unfortunate sort of thing, but the fact that I'm Australian caught in this makes people pay more attention to it. So part of the reason for writing the book was just that, because I know that average sort of older Australians will think, oh gee, that could have been me when I transited through Yangon, or when I was on holidays, I could have been caught up. And, you know, it has that sort of resonance. So in my way, that's how I would like, you know, Australians to, in a sense, pay more attention to that. The other aspect, I suppose, but here again, I'm going a little bit beyond my knowledge base, but Australia is a very welcoming country, but I think we haven't taken in that many people when it comes to Myanmar. That's a bit unfortunate, because in so many ways, right? I mean, you know, as a people, Myanmar's contribution to Australia is just immense. You know, I can think of no sort of better community, frankly, in Australia than Myanmar. So, but I think it is about bringing attention, because I think most people in Australia have immense goodwill if they know about the story. So I guess it's, you know, up to us, even though the burdens on us all are incredible at the moment, but to think of perhaps innovative ways and to keep it going so that people get to hear more about the story.
Thank you, Sean. We've got the last question.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for your hard work for Myanmar people. My question is, what are your future plans to support the pro-democracy movement in Myanmar? And also, how do you want to collaborate with Myanmar National Unity Government and the Australian government in those future plans?
So I think it's doing things like this, doing things like the book, as I mentioned, just trying to raise awareness and all that, and just get attention to Myanmar much higher up. I like, you know, and do offer all of the support I can to the NUG and all of that. But having said that, I think what's really important and like to note is that the people in Myanmar, the people outside of Myanmar, but people of Myanmar, they know what to do. I actually don't think, to be honest, towards, and Pa will know this, but I pretty much, or any sort of value adding, like intellectually and things like that, that was done by the time I left. The people at that Myanmar Development Institute, the reformers and all that, they knew what to do. So I don't think at a sort of practical level, someone like me, can be there sort of cheering on, being available to help raise awareness and all that sort of stuff. Maybe sometimes open doors, make connections, stuff like that. But, the resources are within the Myanmar people and they can get the job done. So the rest of the world, I think, is just what we need to do, talking about the rest of the world, is just clear that space and let the people of Myanmar do again what we know they can do. They're more equipped than certainly any other people I've encountered with. So my job is to sort of be there at the background, but cheering on. That's the main thing.
Thank you very much, Sean. So we will look forward to see many of your movements raising awareness and many aspects for Burma.